This is episode 48 of the SteadyTrade Podcast with your host, Tim Bowen.
That was like the golden age of shorting junk.
And Steven Johnson.
My biggest loss is like 5,000 because I'm a gunslinger newbie who hasn't learned yet.
Today's episode is part one of a two-part conversation with Mark Croock.
Great to join you guys here.
Mark started trading about 8 years ago.
I've been trading, since 2010.
The epitome of safe and steady.
I'm certainly not a gunslinger.
Mark gradually built his account to over $1 million. Where will your account be in 8 years? Listen in as Mark explains how he did it. But first, let's dip into the listener mailbag. Today's question comes from Sally in Atlanta. Sally wants to know, what is the best way to build a watch list for penny stocks?
Sally from Atlanta asks, what's the best way to build a stock watch list for penny stocks?
I can just take this one straight away because I've got this new strategy that's the best. So what I do, and you have it slightly different but the same thing, is I have day one runners, day two runners, day three runners, and day four runners. And then I'll have a scan on StocksToTrade that says stocks up more than 10% on 200,000 volume traded. And all of the stocks that close more than 10%, more than 200,000, say 800,000 volume traded, I'll put them in day one. And then if they have a green day the next day, I'll put them in day two. And then if the day two ones have a green day the next day, I'll put them in day three. And then I can see, it helps you really look at patterns form over 1, 2, and 3 days. So you're not just chasing the stock of the day. And then you start trying to see when do the stocks tend to fail and how high do they spike before they fail. And then you can start looking at, do I want to go long the red to green on day one, or do I want to short a stock up day three? This is how you learn to make those plans.
Yeah, I think that's I've done very, very similar to you. And I talk about this all the time in StocksToTrade Pro is I call it rolling watch lists. I don't know if I created that term or if I borrowed it from somebody, but I always have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday watch list, as well as like a swing trade watch list, as well as a sector watch list. And where you're watching them day 1, 2, and 3, I'm doing the same thing. I always am looking to roll those watch lists over because I want to know, say it's an earnings winner and it's green again on the second day. Well, then going into day 3, that's a red to green watch. It's a red to green watch until it fails. So I say the best way to build a watch list is look at the gainers, look at the volume, and then build those watch lists and roll them over for days or even weeks at a time.
So I've got my watch list. You've got your rolling watch list. And I know I speak to Roland Wolf sometimes, and he calls his the Roland Wolf list, which is kind of like a Roland watch list, but it's a Roland Wolf list. Anyway, crap joke. Next.
Hey there, SteadyTrade listeners. Want to know how guys like Tim Grittani and Tim Bowen followed in the footsteps of Tim Sykes, earning financial security and beyond by day trading penny stocks? Do you want to see if you have what it takes? Even if your name isn't Tim? Then why not check out the Timothy Sykes Trading Challenge, where you can be personally mentored by these guys and other successful traders. If you're interested and if you have what it takes, go to timothysykes.com and let them know that you want to work directly with Tim Sykes today.
Mark Croock is I live and breathe. I am extraordinarily excited to have you on this podcast for a number of reasons. The predominant reason is that you are the epitome of steady. And our podcast is called the SteadyTrade Podcast. So you are the prime time guest to interview, to get to know a little bit about your story, what worked, what didn't, how you got started, where you are now, and to deliver some very relevant and practical advice for all of the listeners who were in your situation when you were starting 5, 6, 7 years ago. But first, I don't know if I want to kind of get an announcement out of the way. Tim Bowen, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there's a big thing we need to talk about.
I noticed you're not wearing the neck brace on. You don't have a neck brace on, so maybe
that's exactly it.
Perhaps a divine intervention. Did
basically basically, I feel like $1 million without this neck brace on. Or Mark Croock just passed $1 million. Mark, how does it feel to pass $1 million, brother?
It's a good feeling. Thanks, Stephen. Great to join you guys here, the podcast. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. I've been trading, since 2010. So right around the time I think Bowen started, Tim Bowen. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and steady is, I guess, more or less a kind of the right way to describe it, because I'm certainly not a gunslinger, and just try to kind of take advantage of opportunities and do it in a very conservative manner consistently over the last several years. And it took some time, but I think I've seen a lot of progress, and always, very excited and happy to help other students who've come along and over the years. And we've seen a lot of good traders come through the woodwork. So, and Stephen, I know you're going to get there soon. So keep it up.
Yeah, I think back, Mark and I actually go back quite a ways. I don't remember. I think it might have been I don't know if it's the first, maybe the second of Tim Sykes. It used to be called the Penny Stocking Conference. And I remember it was, there was about, back then there was about 25 people there, and just kind of randomly, Mark was sitting right behind me. That's where I met him. I'm guessing that was somewhere around 2010. We were both kind of getting traction, getting started in the penny stocking world. And I look back, I think we kind of became, I don't know if we were necessarily friends right away, but had always kind of conversed and kind of, it's interesting. We got started way back when the penny stocking conference was like 25 people, and now it's like pushing 1,000. So
yeah, things have changed a lot since the good old days.
Sorry, just before we start to get into your story and we start to hear how you get started and what your key path was, I've developed this strategy recently, and I just wanted to get your kind of thoughts on it. I've been indifferent, and a lot of people say it's good and a lot of people say it's bad, but I was thinking, what do you think of the strategy of whenever you trade something, I just trade the exact same thing at the exact same time? What do you think of that strategy? Because I'm thinking about starting doing it again.
I never follow anybody. Even me. I make a ton of mistakes, and everyone sort of has to develop their own style. And it's a process. It takes some time.
Normally, I don't like to jump in with certain situations, and I don't want to interrupt the interview. But just while we're talking about my journey, I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast just a couple of days ago, and they were talking about the progress that you need to take to become a professional comic. And Joe Rogan was saying to this guy that it took him like 7-8 years to become a professional comic. And on his journey to become a professional comic, he died like a bomb when it came to comedy. Like, he would have cold sweats on stage. He would go to bed thinking, I'm quitting this for sure, for good. And he would be like, it is impossible to come back from this. And there would be so many times throughout the 7-year journey before he became famous that he thought, I'm never going to make this. And then in the end, he realized that he was one of the, say, 100 major players who made it because he was the only one who had the courage to pursue the journey. And I think trading is a lot like that. It's so difficult to come over the hurdles, to quit and to come back, to blow up and to refund. It takes a real courage, I guess, is the only word. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Mark, and to see if you agree or to see what your journey was like, and why don't you kind of prerequisite that by just taking me through the journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's I definitely agree with that. It takes a hell of a lot of courage to get into something that's unconservative, so to speak, type of thing like trading. But I actually started trading back in 2010. Previous to that, I had graduated in 2004 with an accounting degree from UT Austin. And I wasn't ever really thrilled about the prospect of working in public accounting, or, didn't really see a long-term journey in that sense. But
then what made you choose that major then?
Well, that's a good question. I had really
a dartboard.
No, I was always pretty good with numbers, and so accounting was a very good foundation, and I thought that potentially it could lead to something else. But I think more than anything, it was just a good, safe bet. And I didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do. I was pretty young and just, a late bloomer, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Stocks were always a very, very interesting thing to me, and I had done some investing back when I was in high school. I had, put some money into some penny stocks as well, which I think was kind of earlier in the 2000s, and then also going even post college. I had dabbled in penny stocks as well, but trading never really crossed my mind. And sometimes I wonder, maybe that could have been something that I could have explored earlier on. But nevertheless, accounting was, and I suppose is always going to be a good foundation. And it didn't really last very long. I was in just never really appealed to me. I got bored with that and took a little break. Eventually I went back into accounting, and I took a job as a general accountant with a coffee manufacturer in Houston. That was pre-Florida days, and I grew up in Texas. So that was kind of my journey in post-college. And as I said, I had dabbled with penny stocks, not from a trading perspective, more from an investment perspective. And I would read message boards. I heard Michael Good and I know Bowen and some other guys who got into trading that kind of dabbled as well. And like I said, I found it always very fascinating with some of these plays, but I never really knew how the game worked. And I came across Sykes and a YouTube video of his, or probably a couple videos at the time. Now there's more than one can imagine. Yeah.
4,500 or something. Yeah. And you said you've seen them all twice. Have you genuinely seen them all twice? Is that legit true? You've seen everyone twice?
Yeah. So the video lessons I'd been watching regularly, I'd categorized them. I went back a couple times, and yeah, I mean that was more, not the more recent ones, but up until a couple years back, I just wanted to soak in as much information as I possibly could, and I think the average individual trying to get into something brand new like this needs to really immerse oneself in really in anything one does, but trading especially. It's I think there's so many different dynamics, and apart from the emotions and the technicals and everything else that goes with it. So yeah, I watched all of Tim's video lessons, and that's really when I started to really get it. I think the challenge.
Now we jumped ahead a little bit. What I want to, going back to like when I met you at the penny stocking conference, kind of where were you at that phase? I can't remember. Were you kind of actively trading, or were you just kind of fresh to it back then? I can't remember.
Yeah, so I was still pretty fresh in the trading space. I really only got very active in late 2010. So I was still kind of getting my feet wet. I was making some trades. I started with about 50 grand, and I actually was fortunate enough to come in without any real pressure. And I know that's something Grittani talks about a lot. I did not have huge pressure. I was single. I had saved up quite a bit from working in accounting and so on. So it was a very interesting time to get into trading, because I didn't know a whole lot, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was in a hurry to really make a ton of money, like some people might otherwise be when they first get started. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I really loved the short side. That's really what I was sold on, no pun intended. I mean, I loved the short selling strategy. And at the time when I started watching Tim and learning, it was more shorting pumps and kind of along the lines of what Michael Good does pretty regularly. And
yeah, we kind of jump back to, back that. I think back to, like, again, when I got started,
the easy days. I
don't want to say easy, but those were
easy now.
I like to call it, and Mark may or may not agree with me, but I kind of like to call that 2007 to like 2011, 2012. That was like the golden age of shorting junk. I would never say trading is easy, and especially borrows were way harder back then. But man, if you could get a borrow back then, it was easier, I would like to say, back then. So
it was easy for you guys.
That was the biggest challenge, I think, is finding the shares to short. The squeezes were certainly prevalent, but I think the strategy became such a widely studied and widely used or widely taught that ultimately, especially now in this bull market, has made it a lot tougher, and especially low flow type of runners like we're seeing even today. I don't know if you guys have been watching CLDC, which is the China Lending Corp, and that one I'm actually somewhat tempted to buy for an afternoon ramp, even though it's already up 57%. But yeah, we've seen a ton of these crazy low floats, and
I think back to what I call the golden age of shorting. You would have, I call them one and dones, where these stocks would spike one day and then die. Maybe you'd get 2 days out of them. I mean, we used to love, the 3 day rule. It was like back then, any stock that was up 2 days in a row, day three, you could again, not that it was like 100%, but you could like hammer stuff day three. Now, last couple of years, we get day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and on,
Yeah, and then Jeevan blows up. It goes day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, then day 5, Jeevan blows up. That's what happens. But the thing is, though, like, Mark, what would you say was the first pattern? How did it all start to click for you? Was it the pump and dumps where you just thought, I kind of get trading, this is my first pattern? Because everyone has a first pattern to make money.
Yeah, so that was really my first real success, was shorting these pumps, and really, first red day type of strategy. So that was something that Tim really and still does, although now it's more longs in this bull market. But shorting first red days after these big 2-3 day parabolic runs were kind of my focus. And while I didn't take massive positions, and still to this day I don't really get too aggressive. It's just not my nature. But again, being able to consistently profit on these kind of opportunities.
Perfect example, first red day, sorry. June 27, first, was it ALBI, ALIB?
ABIL.
ABIL. Perfect first red day example, no?
That's a good example. ABIL, yeah. I didn't find shares to short, but yeah, we've definitely seen a number of examples in these recent days and weeks and months. Yeah, so shorting has definitely been my main focus, and really trying to work more on the long side. And that really impresses me when I see Grittani go long on some of these bulletin board plays, sometimes on the NASDAQ as well. And I think that's really what ultimately can turn a great trader into a superstar trader, somebody that's able to see the momentum on the front side and then short it on the backside. And I think Grittani made 200,000+ on CVSI, then shorted it. Not sure how much he made on the backside, but being able to capture the momentum on the front side and then nailing the backside, I think that's the true superstar in trading. And most traders, I would say, most successful traders are more short biased. And I think the predictability of a stock, especially a penny stock that goes full supernova, the predictability of a big 30 to 50% drop is pretty darn good, because you know where it comes from ultimately and where it'll end up. So
that's a great point, and that's something I think in my barrage of sarcastic tweets, again, it's Twitter, it's worthless, but what I can, I totally agree with the potential of shorting. And again, we've talked to whether it be Phil Godeker or Grittani or you or Good or all these guys. The problem is, what I see, and obviously we've had several episodes with Steven about this, is people, I think newer traders, they get that locked in their head that all, quote, I'm doing air quotes, quote unquote, all these stocks fail. And you know what? 99% of them do. But what the new trader lacks is the timing. The new trader wants to jump in right away. And what the new trader lacks is that discipline to say, okay, I'm wrong. The new trader shorts this stock and just covers their eyes and hopes that it's going to pull back. That's the difference between the pros and the newbies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the timing is very critical, and that's something that comes with experience, obviously, and that holding and hoping is a big problem for new traders. And I know a lot of the listeners out there are newer, so that's something that has got to be corrected. And the only way to do that is to learn from tough losses. And we all have losses. I have, any trader that's been around for a good amount of time still has losses, but the holding and hoping and getting into plays that are not ideal. And that's, I think, one of the things that newer traders have a biggest problem is getting into trades that are just not justified. And eliminating those is not easy, but that's kind of your first step to really finding that true success is focusing only on the good setups.
I mean, I'd have to ask as well, because Mark, you seem like an incredibly conservative trader. My biggest loss is like 5,000 because I'm a gunslinger newbie who hasn't learned yet. Tim Bowen's more sensible. His biggest loss is like $8,000 when he was trading. You were trading like UVXY or one of these.
No, it was FAS or FAZ, one of the triple leverage financial. Yeah.
So Mark, as a conservative, I mean, we can both pitch guesses, Tim Bowen. I don't know if you know, and Mark, if you're open enough to say, what's your biggest loss and how did it happen?
So my biggest loss, gosh, I lost, I believe, 20,000 shorting a stock called GNIN. It was a pump and dump that I got a little too aggressive on, and I don't remember the exact amount, but I've had a few $20,000 losses, and that's just been kind of been my max threshold, so to speak. So I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what else has been. Just looking on Profitly real fast.
And you mentioned GNIN. I mean, that was just one that, was it like day one of the move, or do you kind of remember what kind of what the setup was, or don't you remember?
Yeah, so GNIN, believe it had already gone red on the day, and it was down. I want to say it was already down like 15%, something like that. And I got caught chasing it, thinking that it was convincingly red, and it was heading much lower. And then the promoters must have stepped in, and or maybe there were just a ton of covers, and then I just got squeezed out, and I took too big of a position, and it was one of those plays. I think that the first red day didn't end up leading to a second red day. It recovered, and I think that pattern tends to work very well. The first red day holding overnight into a second red day, but certainly. It doesn't always happen that way, and these bulletin board plays, as you guys know, can get really manipulated, and so I got jammed up in that short and ended up with a sizable loss. But
now, what made you stop out? Was it just max pain? Why did you finally, stop out after being down 20 grand?
And what made you hold it to get to 20 grand as well? Two important questions.
Yeah. So I took such a big position, and I think that was the biggest part of this, of the biggest issue with the trade was taking an aggressive sizing in too quickly. And when a stock moves against you, and you're in with such size, I think that becomes a very scary moment, and that's what happened. I mean, I don't think from a percentage standpoint that it was a ridiculously bad loss, but the dollar loss just gets too big when your position size is overblown. So that really led to I think I've had a few losses that are similar to that, where I get too aggressive, and I've been pretty good over the years not shorting too soon, meaning if the stock is holding green, I'll stay away, and a lot of traders try to pick the top on some of these plays, but even when I do, as conservative as I am, shorting on that first red day, you really got to focus on the entry, and I think that some of my losses tend to balloon when the position size is just way too big, and I don't tend to hold stubbornly for too long, so that's really, I think, something that I've done pretty good job of eliminating. Well, not entirely, but not getting too aggressive, no matter how good the risk reward is, and perhaps I should get a little more aggressive on certain plays. I like to size in, but I think just getting older and having done this now, being married and with a child, from that perspective, that has a little bit of an issue in terms of getting overly aggressive and never risking too much. And I think Michael Good can probably attest to that sort of mentality. But staying steady is kind of been the name of the game for me.
Hi, this is Aaron, a.k.a. Double A Ron from New York City, and I like to go outside and find a stray dog, preferably an aggressive breed like a pit bull or a Rottweiler. Then I get real close, stare it down eye to eye until it starts to chase me. Then I run. That's right, I run while listening to Steven and Tim on the SteadyTrade Podcast. You can register to win real actual prizes at their website, SteadyTrade.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a glowing review on iTunes. I did, and this is how we say goodbye in New York City.